Kim.
Thank you. Let's see. I guess this is the hot seat. No, this is a hot seat. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Traumatized to be here. As Anne said, this is one of the more, I think, angst-ridden preparations for a talk that I've ever had, and it's because I know the expectations here at TED are so high. I've been to several TED conferences before, and really the caliber of speakers is incredibly impressive. So I figured I'd just stick to my material. For those who don't know me, I'm a software entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and what I'd like to talk a little about today is my perspective at Marimba, my company, on how the internet is evolving, really from being a curiosity or a place to slap marketing pages up to being a utility on par with electricity or gas or water. It's interesting also that this is that I'm speaking at TED here almost 3 years to the day after Java was introduced for the very first time at TED. John Gage from Sun Microsystems demonstrated the world's first interactive web browser, and I think really radically and suddenly changed the notion of what the internet could be. I'm not going to talk about Java today, and probably would hear a collective sigh of relief from the audience on that. What I would like to talk about is the transformation that I see happening of the internet from a PC and a browser, which is really sort of people's notion, I think, of the internet today, to a platform for the delivery of services, and the impact this is having on industries, many industries. I'd like to take a couple of examples. The banking industry, for one thing. The banking industry is under incredible competitive pressure today for a number of reasons. Banks are consolidating at just an overwhelming rate. Today there are about 8,000 banks, and some people are predicting that there will be only 80 banks by the year 2000. And that it won't be unusual to see banks with assets of $400 to $500 billion each. The problem with the banks are facing, of course, is that bricks and mortar banking is just simply too expensive. Can't scale in the 21st century. Tremendous competitive pressures from companies. Travelers Insurance is a great example of a company that's now starting to merge banking with insurance services, with equities trading, placing tremendous competitive pressure on the banks. So the trend will be really creating an environment that envelops the customer. What the banks want to do is form a relationship with you. They want to create an environment where not only do you do online banking, but you have a complete financial services platform where you can do equities trading, provide insurance services, and so forth. And leveraging technology will be key to this. Massive slicing and dicing of parallel databases, anticipating my every need. So if I'm 53 years old, then in 2 years perhaps I start getting advice on retirement packages. If I have a couple of 12-year-old kids, maybe a few years from now I start getting advice on college tuition help. So the point is, the trend has to be away from the bricks and mortar model that the banks have been using towards this environment that envelops the customer and enables this ongoing relationship. What's going to enable this is not a web page, but rather a real software application that gets delivered across the net transparently, that I as a consumer will be able to subscribe to by just clicking a button and having this thing launch, arrive across the net, install itself, and update itself with the latest interest rates and bug fixes and new features. That's what the banks must do in order to survive. And this is a model that is not specific, certainly, to the banking industry. It's actually spilling over into the software industry itself. Within the next couple of years, you will no longer go to the store and buy a software package and come home and struggle to install it. You'll subscribe to a word processor, to the word processing channel. And the word processing program will arrive across the net, install itself on your computer, and update with the latest features again in the background. And it'll be customized to your needs. So if you're a novice user, then you get a smaller set of features than if you're an advanced user. The leasing models can emerge now, or renting, rent to own, or pay-per-view, pay-per-use. So completely new models for software, for the software industry itself will emerge as a result of this new technology. And this is actually not just for individuals, but for entire corporations. This is spelling into another trend we're seeing from our vantage point, which is outsourcing. The outsourcing of IT. That's not a new information technology. That's not a new notion, the idea of a company outsourcing its information technology needs. But what is new, what we see coming around the bend, is outsourcing the entire infrastructure of information technology. So email, this is starting to happen. Little companies are popping up in Silicon Valley that provide outsourcing for email. Websites, I mean, that's we all know about that. But big enterprise applications like SAP and Bond, if people are familiar with those applications, these are tremendously expensive. Companies buy them. They're incredibly complex to install and use. You have to hire a huge IT staff. And then a new version comes out, and these companies are having software essentially shoved down their throats. They can't absorb anymore. So the new trend we see happening is the idea of subscribing to a service. So instead of buying the SAP accounting software package, you would, or enterprise resource planning package, you would subscribe to the SAP Service Bureau. And what happened when you as Acme Corporation did this is, again, essentially a click of a button, the software application is delivered via CD, probably, because it's going to be pretty huge. And then a connection is made back across the net on an ongoing basis, enabling the updating of this thing. What happens is that SAP turns from a software company into a service bureau, and the software becomes a service that's extended across the net. This is a very powerful model, and it's actually essential for the software industry. They're not going to be able to survive because companies are going to stop buying software. So the idea of software as a service is something that we see happening over and over and over again. And the benefit, of course, to the software industry and every other industry, the banking industry, is predictable recurring revenues and the idea of transaction fees. So no longer a single fee paid for a software package, but rather an ongoing service. So it's all very well and good, and this is a sort of a rosy future that I'm painting here. But as Seymour Papert said, people often overestimate what they can do in 18 months and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. The point being that, if we had listened to the pundits about 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, I guess, when the net was really bursting on the scene, we would all be paying our taxes online and renewing our driver's license and having little intelligent agents conducting price arbitrage to find us the cheapest seats on United Airlines. Of course, that hasn't happened yet. But on the other hand, I think that even the most far-fetched futurists can't even imagine how we're going to be using the net in 10 years' time. I'd like to switch gears a little and talk about what some of the infrastructure challenges are to getting to this vision that I'm painting, and take a couple of topics. Java, for one. Java is certainly going to be an engine fueling the development of this notion of software as a service. But there have been some bumps in the road. Lawsuits, performance issues, compatibility issues. I'd like to just address those by saying these are temporary problems. I think we all get caught up too much in the drama of the industry oftentimes. The fact is, what we're seeing in my company is big corporations are migrating to Java because it's actually making them more productive, and I think we're going to start seeing the results of this over the next 12 to 18 months. So what you're not going to see is lots of Java applets and web pages. That's not where Java is going to be useful. Java is going to be useful for building big server-side applications. Sometimes these applications will run client-side as well, but they're not going to be browser-based. The browser is another topic. I think most of us, when we think of the net, we think about really the browser as being the equivalent of the internet. But the browser is not going to be fueling the evolution of these services. The browser is a vehicle for displaying text. It is not a framework for delivering applications or services. It cannot handle interactive, rich, multimedia experiences. And then we've had the problem of various browser vendors piling more and more software in the browser and essentially building almost operating environments. These things are becoming so bloated and incompatible as a result that they're becoming, we're recreating the problem we had with the Mac PC, the multiple platform problem. So browsers as the deployment vehicle for these services will not cut it, and we're going to have, I think, what will happen instead is new technologies that enable software applications, little agents that basically pull the software, the bits across the net persistently and permanently, in quotes, install on your hard disk that application and then incrementally update the thing in the background, all transparently. Bandwidth, another issue. Naturally, we all know how bandwidth starved the world is, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. I mean, as wonderful, as alluring as DSL and ISDN and satellite and cable modems and all that stuff are, the fact is, for the average person, that stuff's not going to be available for quite a few years to come. So the challenge really, and the thing that we need to focus on in the time between now and then, is making more efficient use of the bandwidth that we have, being more ecological. There's tremendous waste on the internet today, tremendous redundancy. On average, when you go to a website, you click on a web page, you're making 33 round trips back and forth. Every morning, if you fire up Netscape Navigator, you're actually making a trip to the server at 500 Middlefield Road in Mountain View, California. Or if you fire up IE4, you're going all the way up to number 1 Microsoft Way in Redmond. Extremely inefficient because everyone else is doing that too. So again, the browser, for a variety of reasons, is not going to cut it. Bandwidth has to get smarter. And the way we're going to do that is by making the applications themselves intelligent, making them know how much has been sent, what still needs to be updated. Fingerprinting, essentially virtual fingerprinting, where the bits at the client side, what's been sent down to your computer, get boiled down to 128-bit digit and then compared to what's at the server side to see whether that fingerprint has changed, all the way down to single bytes. That's making an application intelligent. File sharing, or the idea of sharing bits of code. So if you have the finance channel, the banking channel, and the game channel, if they all are going to use the Coke ad, only one copy of the Coke ad gets installed. I mean, it's very basic stuff, but today we're a long ways off from that happening. It's not there yet. So again, intelligence in the application is what's going to make the bandwidth, is going to play a very big role, I should say, in making the bandwidth much more available, the skippy bandwidth we have. So what we're seeing is the beginning, however, of the nirvana that I'm describing, this idea of software as a service. And one company that's doing something very interesting is Ericsson. Ericsson, of course, the big telecommunications company, also makes devices. And the big challenge in the device market, it's a very cutthroat market, is getting the device out of the factory sooner. So if you can shave off 2 months, it's a tremendous competitive advantage. What Ericsson is doing is building a new generation of cell phones that will be deployed out of the factory in a matter of even weeks, and then have the software get sent across the net, which may include the operating environment of the phone itself, as well as, again, services. So stock quotes, a restaurant guide that knows that you're in the 213 area code and therefore gives you a listing of restaurants in LA that are vegetarian because it knows you're vegetarian. Again, the idea of services and ongoing transaction fees for Ericsson, and a tremendous competitive advantage for them and for other device manufacturers getting into this business. So the loyalty, brand loyalty, will not be to the device, it'll be to the service. The other big change, or big evolution, I should say, that we're seeing is the idea of the net enabling connections between companies that were never before possible. The net, in fact, is really precipitating a new competitive environment that forces companies to hook up together to provide customized products to consumers much faster and much cheaper. It's the idea of sort of daisy-chained relationships where there's an intelligent value chain that links, for instance, a rubber factory with Goodyear tires, with Ford, and any change in production level is very fine-tuned and immediately detected. You can tweak up or tweak down the productivity. So latency, the goal for latency is to go to 0 in production. Throughput is the goal. Constraints are assumed and then planned around through this software. And the common theme to all of this that I'm describing is a software application that is shared among all these companies that allows them to track exactly how that product is being evolved and deployed through the factory. What this will enable is the movement from a producer-based economy that we're in today to a consumer-based economy, where build to order will be expected. And a company that certainly precipitated this or been a pioneer in this area is Dell Computer. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Dell. They're doing now $4 million a day off their website in sales. Phenomenal. And they are able to build a computer to order in 6 hours. So if you place an order at noon, they've shipped your computer built to order by 6 p.m. They actually they have negative accounts receivable. So this is creating entirely new metrics for how you measure the success of a company. Negative accounts receivable. Michael Dell financed his company on credit cards from his dorm room. He never got financing. He shipped his first computer without having financing because the first credit card payment was how he got the thing out of the door. And this is really setting a trend. The net has amplified the basics of mail order, build to order. And of course is putting tremendous competitive pressure on Dell's competitors. Those competitors are faced with the fact that they still have an industrial model. The PC industry for them is still very much industrial based, and they've got dealer networks that were set up to deal with mass production and predictable or inventory levels that were predicted to be a certain number at a certain time. So what they're faced with is how to move to this build to order custom deployment model without cannibalizing their existing business. Very, very difficult. The auto industry is another industry where this is going to be essential. And what's interesting is we're already seeing examples of the concept that I'm talking about, build to order, focus on the customer, incredibly raised customer expectations. We're seeing this model happen not through the use of necessarily exclusively internet technology, but rather through programs like GM Buy-Tel, Auto Buy-Tel, or GM Power Buy, I think it's called, Buy Power. This is a program that allows you to dial a 1-800 number and have a car essentially built to order and shipped out to you or available in the nearest dealership. Now, this is not something that the internet specifically is playing a role in. It's more the philosophy, the competitive environment that the internet is precipitating that the auto industry is waking up to and realizing there's going to be a whole new way of doing business. So it's very interesting. It's Neil Weintraut of 21st Century Internet Partners, as he puts it, the net is really bigger than the net. It's affecting more than just technology. So what this really comes down to is, at the end of the day, and what our focus is making the technology totally transparent. None of this is going to be possible without that. I mean, today we're all totally consumed with downloads and plug-ins and configuring internet connections. Within 10 years, I think we're not going to talk about using the internet anymore. We're going to talk about the services, or maybe 5 years even, the services that we enjoy. The fact is that the most powerful tools in the world are those that are invisible, like electricity. Think about this morning when you woke up and turned on the water faucet. You were really using the world's simplest interface, and yet you were accessing one of the most complicated networks on the planet. Think of all the aqueducts and reservoirs and pipes that water had to travel through to get onto your toothbrush. Or when you picked up the phone, you were using, again, an incredibly simple interface, and yet you were able to connect instantly to any of 900 million people in the world who own phones. So at the end of the day, I think it's what's often difficult is to grasp a new phenomenon, to understand it, to struggle to understand it while sort of trying to define it in the paradigms we're familiar with of today. And it reminds me of the story of the Western Union executive who saw the telephone for the very first time and said, I can't figure out why anyone would want one of these things. Even if you can talk to someone on the phone, you're still going to have to write everything down. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.